balancing these is the real chore. There's a gimbal right here and a tensioner for the gimbal. I'm going to put tense just for... So the gimbal center is right about here. If you make the camera assembly, you know, with the weight and all back here, if you make it so that against the camera it more or less balances at about the point where the gimbal is, you know, just above the gimbal basically. And I've heard people go either way. Some people say, oh, I like more weight in the bottom, and I've heard other people say you should make the bottom slightly less heavy than the camera. Making the bottom slightly less heavy than the camera will make it act a little slower. I'm going to make this gimbal real loose for demonstration here. If I tip the camera, see, it rights itself slowly. That's kind of what you want. I don't want it to right super fast. And this is with no friction at all, so I'm doing pretty well. A little more friction will slow it down even more. And that's what you want, is just a little bit of friction. People talk about oiling this gimbal. Just use a tiny bit. I used a tiny bit of synthetic motor oil, you know, right on the sphere, and then I kind of spread it around, moving this thing around until it spread it around. I found the advantage was that before I did that, the gimbal had some sticky spots in it. You know, when I was off to like this side, it's still a tiny bit sticky now even. It kind of sticks to that side if I go all the way. But the oil greatly helped that situation. And once I get it worked in better, I'm sure it'll be good all 360 degrees. So it's worth oiling that. And some people say don't use WD-40. I wouldn't use WD-40. It's not a good oil for that kind of purpose. And the big deal is this Canon, as I showed in a different clip, this Canon is quite off-center. It's got 4 AA cells packed in this area, so that makes this side of the camera kind of heavy. And the post is not quite center of gravity, although it's a lot closer than the Canon is, obviously. So I had to find a spot, and I showed that in a different clip where I ended up drilling a hole because I didn't have I couldn't get it to work in the 1T slot. I had to use the T slots, the slots that go outwards, and it was just too nose heavy and too back heavy, depending on the 2 slots that, you know, kind of half worked. It needed a slot really in between them, so I ended up drilling a hole. Well, this is what I had to do to make this balance. I just couldn't get it to balance in the slats. I was trying it down here, and then I was trying it down here. I really need to be off center because the batteries are all on one side of this camera. The hole is not in the center of the camera, and it's not in the center of gravity of the camera either. You know, the mounting hole. With the batteries on one side, it really does tend to make it heavy on the right side. So, long and short of it is I had to drill my own hole where I figured I needed it. And I got it apart right now because I widened the hole a little more. The downside of all that is it no longer captivates this nut. You know, the nut was just sized critically so that it wouldn't fall through that slot too easy. So it kind of stayed captive in there. Now with this hole, I'm not captive at all. I fall right in and out of the hole. So I'm going to have to make sure I don't lose this part, you know. Keep it with it somehow. I guess I can always put it in the T slot, I guess. And I keep misspeaking here. This is the Canon, which is what I'm shooting most of this video with. This is actually a Kodak. This one that has the 4 AA's on the right side. This is a Kodak, one of the last Kodaks made. So with the gimbal fairly loose, you know, that's what I want. The thing to balance. right itself fairly quickly, not too fast. And you can see, even if I have a really jiggly hand, it's stabilizing the camera quite a bit, even though the camera would be jiggling, you know, but compared to what my hand's doing. And of course you need the, and I've got no friction in here at all. You see I really can't even turn the camera because my friction is so low. So that's one reason why you have to use a little bit of friction to make it practical, so you can aim the camera. But you want just enough friction where I can still get away with, you know, cushioning some of my jiggling. And you can see if I was shooting without it and I was jiggling this much, the camera would be a lot more jiggly than it would be without. And this camera, with its mount way off on the side here, would really be tough to use in the stabilizer. I used to shoot my videos with this Canon. It's kind of a nice camera. It's not wide enough though for modern videos. Just for yucks, I thought I'd see if I could make the Canon balance. I did a pretty good facsimile, or whatever you want to say, of a good imitation of balancing it. It didn't take very long at all. See, I've got it pretty well balanced. It's a real challenge because this camera's mount is way off on this side and the batteries are way off on that side. So it really made it a challenge for this thing to balance. Use the T-slot to its full extent. And then I also did what I didn't do with the other camera, is ended up with the this adjusted so it's less than straight. Deliberately cocked it over to make up that last little bit of adjustment. And I could have done that instead of drilling the hole in the bracket like I did for the other camera. I could have just done that. I could have used the center, you know, front and back, got that right, and then just done this to make the camera right itself correctly. But I don't like this. The stability isn't quite right. The dynamics of it aren't quite right. But it works pretty well. I mean, it'd be well enough. You know, it's doable. So even with a pretty extreme camera like this, you're able to balance it. It didn't take me long. Because I'm practiced now, though, you know. And I'm sure I'd be a little bit heavy on the weight, definitely. So if I was going to use this camera all the time, I'd probably ditch the weight and get some washers. You know, maybe cut that weight down to about 2/3 or half of what it is. Using this mount with a weight that's a lot heavier than balanced, I showed you how to do it balanced, which I recommend. But if you go with the heavier weight at the bottom, which is my situation with this Canon, you'll get the following effect. It'll be more likely to bounce on you. This kind of seasick type thing going on with a rapid motion, because you're not really stable. The advantage to it, though, is that you can use more tension on your gimbal. You can use more friction, which allows you to direct the camera more before it stabilizes, and it'll still route itself, even if you know, it can still even stabilize itself to a bit now, even with a fairly tight setting on the gimbal. It'll still right itself, which with it set light or balanced, it would never really do that. So that's the only advantage to having a heavy tail, is you're able to use more friction, which might be useful if you're going to be in a real action shoot, you know, holding the camera from one hand as you bicycle down the trail, you know. You might want to get a little bit tighter gimbal. I don't know. Depends on what you want to accept for your photo. You know, if you're too shaky, but if you're too steady, it'll kind of lick off to space without following you, you know. Because to be able to direct the camera, you have to have some friction, or otherwise the camera will just kind of spin as you spin the handle. Z5120 brisk walk handheld. Handheld stabilizer, moderate gimbal pressure.